Alright, chapter 6. Let's put it to focus. Yes, Holt leant back and surveyed his handiwork with a satisfied sigh. There, he said, that should do the trick. Horace looked at him doubtfully, his eyes moving from Holt's pleased expression to the official-looking document that he had just completed forging. Whose seal is that at the bottom? He asked finally, indicating the impression of a rampant bull that was set in a large slope of wax in the bottom right-hand corner of the parchment. Holt touched the wax gently, checking to see if it had hardened completely. Well, I suppose if it's anyone, it's mine, he admitted, but I'm hoping that our Canadian friend will think it belongs to King Herne of Gallica. Is that what his royal seal looks like? Horace asked, and Holt studied the symbol impressed in the wax a little more critically. Pretty much, he replied. I think the real one may be a little leaner in the body, but the forger I bought it from had a pretty indistinct impression to work with. But Horace began unhappily, then stopped. Holt looked at him, one eyebrow raised quizzically. But, he repeated, making the word into a question. Horace merely shook his head. He knew Holt would probably laugh at his objection if he voiced it. Oh, never mind, he said at length. Then, realizing that the former ranger was still waiting for him to speak, he changed the subject. I thought you said there was no ruling court in Gallica, he said. Holt shook his head. There's no effective ruling court, he told the young man. King Herne is the hereditary king of the Gallicans, but he has no real power. He maintains a court in the southern part of the country and lets the local warlords do as they please. Yes, I noticed some of that, Horace said meaningfully, thinking about the encounter with the warlord Mr. D that had delayed their progress through Gallica. So old King Herne is something of a paper tiger, Holt continued, but he has been known to send every envoys into other countries from time to time. Hence this. He gestured at the sheet of parchment that he was waving gently in the air so that the ink might dry and the wax seal might harden. The sight of the seal brought back all of Horace's misgivings. It just doesn't seem right, he blurted out before he could stop himself. Holt smiled patiently at him, blowing gently on some damp patches of ink. It's as right as I can get it, he said mildly, and I doubt that the average border guard in Scandinavia will see the difference, particularly if you're dressed in that fine suit of Gallican armor you took from Mr. D. But Horace shook his head doggedly. Now that his concern was out in the open, he was determined to plow on. That's not what I meant, he said, then added, and well, you know it. Holt grinned easily at the young man's troubled expression. Sometimes your sense of mortality amazes me, he said gently. You do understand that we do have to get past the border guards if we're to have any chance of finding Will and the girl. Evelyn, Horace corrected him automatically. Holt waved the comment aside. Whoever. He knew that Horace tended to refer to Princess Cassandra, the daughter of the Ireland king, by the name she had assumed when Will and Horace had first encountered her. He continued, You do realize that, don't you? Horace heaved a deep sigh. Yes, I suppose so. It's just that it seems so dishonest somehow. Holt's eyebrows rose in a perfect arch. Dishonest? Horace went on awkwardly. Well, I was always taught that people's seals and crests were sort of, I don't know, sacrosanct. Sacrosanct. I mean, he gestured toward the figure of the bull imprisoned in red wax. That's a king's signature. Holt pursed his lips thoughtfully. He's not much of a king, he replied. That's not the point. It's a principle, don't you see? It's like, he paused, trying to think of a reasonable parallel. It's like, and finally came up with, it's like and tempering with the mail. In Ireland, the mail was a service controlled by the crown, and there were dire penalties prescribed for anyone who tried to interfere with it. Not that such penalties had ever stopped Holt in the past when he'd needed to do a little tempering in that direction. He decided that it wouldn't be wise to mention that to Horace right now. Obviously, the morality code taught in Castle Redmont's battle school was a good deal more right than the behaviour embraced by the Ranger Corps. Of course, it was the Knights of the Realm who were entrusted with the protection of the Royal Mail, so it was logical that they should have such an attitude ingrained in them from an early part of their training. So how would you suggest that we deal with the problem? He asked at length. How would you get us past the border? Horace shrugged. He preferred simple solutions. We could fight our way in, he suggested. Holt raised his eyes to heavens at the thought. So it's immoral to bluff our way past with an official document, he began, but Horace corrected him. A false document, with a forged seal at the bottom. Holt conceded the point. All right, a forged document, if you like. That's reprehensible, but it would be perfectly all right for us to go through the border, post hacking and shooting down everyone in sight. Is that the way you see it? Now that he had put it that way, Horace had to admit there was an anomaly in his thinking. I didn't say we should kill everyone in sight, he objected. We could just fight our way through. That's all. It's more honest and above board, and I thought that's what knights were supposed to do. Knights may be, but rangers aren't, Holt muttered, but he said it below his breath so that Horace couldn't hear him. He reminded himself that Horace was very young and idealistic. Knights did live by a strict code of honour and ethics, and those factors were emphasized in the first few years of an apprentice knight training. It was only later in life that they learned to temper their ideals with a little expediency? Sure, we're going to say that. Look, he said in a conciliatory tone, think about it this way. If we just barged on through and headed for Helsham, the border guards would send word after us. The elements of surprise would be totally lost and we could find ourselves in big trouble. If we decide to fight our way in, the only way to do it is by leaving nobody alive to spread the word. Understand? Horace nodded unhappily. He could see the logic in what Holt was saying. The ranger continued in the same reasoning tone. This way, nobody gets hurt. You pose as an emissary from the Gallican court with a dispatch from King Henry. Oh, it's Henry, not Herney. Sorry, King Henry. You wear Mr. D's black armor, it's obviously Gallican in style, and you keep your nose stuck in the air and leave the talking to me, your servant. That's the sort of behavior they'd expect from a self-important Gallican noble. There's no reason for any word to be sent informing Ragnar that 2 outlanders have crossed the border. After all, we're supposed to be going to see him anyway. And what's in the dispatch that I'm supposed to be taking? Horace asked. Holt couldn't resist a grin. Sorry, that's confidential. You don't expect me to breathe the secrecy of the mail system, do you? Breach the secrecy of the mail system, do you? Horace gave him a pained look and he relented. All right, it's a simple business matter, actually. King Henry is negotiating for the hire of 3 wolf ships from the Scandinavians, that's all. Horace looked surprised at that. Isn't that a little unusual? He asked, and Holt shook his head. Not a bit. Scandinavians are mercenaries. They're also hiring out to one side or another. We're just pretending that Henry wants to subcontract a few ships and crews for a raiding expedition against the Adi. The Adi? Horace said, frowning uncertainly, and Holt shook his head in mock despair. You know, it might be more useful if Rodney spent less time teaching you people ethics and a little more time on geography. The Adi are the desert people on the south. He paused and saw that this made no impression on the young man. Horace continued to look at him with a blank expression. On the other side of constant sea, he added, and now Horace showed signs of recognition. Oh, them, he said dismissively. Yes, them, Holt replied, mimicking the tone, but I wouldn't expect you to think about them too much. There are only millions of them. But they never bother us, do they? Horace said comfortably. Holt gave a short laugh. Not so far, he agreed, and just pray they don't decide to. Horace could sense that Holt was on the verge of delivering a lecture on international strategy and diplomacy. That sort of thing usually left Horace's head spinning after the first few minutes while he tried to keep up with who was aligned with whom and who was conspiring against their neighbours and what they hoped to gain from it. He preferred Sir Rodney's type of lecture. Right, wrong, black, white, out swords, hand and bash. He thought it might be expedient to head off Holt's incipient harangue. I don't know what that word is. Yeah, the best way to do that, he had learned from past experience, was to agree with him. Well, I suppose you're right about the forgery, he admitted. After all, it's only the Gallican seal we're forging, isn't it? It's not as if you're forging a document from King Duncan. Even you wouldn't go so far as that, would you? Of course not, Holt replied smoothly. He began to pack away his pens and ink and his other forger's tools. He was glad he'd laid his hands on the forged Gallican seal in his pack so easily. It was well that he hadn't had to tip them out all on the risk of Horace seeing the near-perfect copy of King Duncan's seal that he carried, among others. Now, may I suggest that you climb into your elegant tin suit, and we'll go and sweet-talk the Canadian border guards. Horace snorted indignantly and turned away, but another thought had occurred to Holt, something that had been on his mind for some time. Horace, he began, and Horace turned back. The ranger's voice had lost its former light tone, and he sensed that Holt was about to say something important. Yes, Holt? When we find Will, don't tell him about the unpleasantry between me and the king, all right? Months ago, denied permission to leave Arelyn in search of Will, Holt had devised a desperate plan. He had publicly insulted the king and, as a result, was banished for a period of 1 year. The subterfuge had caused Holt a great deal of mental anguish in the past months. As a banished person, he was automatically expelled from the Ranger Corps. The loss of his silver Oakleaf was possibly the worst punishment of all, yet he bore it willingly for the sake of his missing apprentice. Whatever you say, Holt, Horace agreed, but Holt seemed to think for once the further explanation was necessary. It's just that I prefer to find my own way to tell him, and the right time, all right? Horace shrugged. Whatever you say, he repeated. Now let's go and talk to these Canadians. But there was to be no talking. The two riders, trailed by the small string of horses, rode through the pass that had zigzagged between the high mountains until the border post finally came into sight. Holt expected to be halted from the small wooden stockroom and tower at any moment, as the guards demanded that they dismount and approach on foot. That would have been normal procedure, but there was no sign of life in the small fortified outpost as they drew nearer. Gates open, Holt muttered as they came closer and could make out more detail. How many men usually garrison a place like this? Horace asked. The ranger shrugged. Half a dozen? A dozen, maybe? They don't seem to be of any of them around, Horace observed, and Holt glanced sideways at him. I noticed that part myself, he replied, then added, What's that? There was an indistinct shape apparent now in the shadows, just inside the open gate. Acting on the same instinct, they both urged their horses into a canter and closed the distance between them and the fort. Holt already felt certain he knew what that shape was. It was a dead Canadian, lying in a pool of blood that had soaked into the snow. Inside there were 10 others, all of them killed the same way, with multiple wounds to their torsos and limbs. The two travellers dismounted carefully and moved among the bodies, studying the awful scene. Who could have done this? Said Horace in a horrified voice. They've been stabbed over and over again. Not stabbed, Holt told him. Shot. These are arrow wounds. And then the killers collected their arrows from the bodies, except for this one. He held up the broken half of an arrow that had been lying concealed under one of the bodies. The Canadians had probably broken it off in an attempt to remove it from the wound. The other half was still buried deep in his thigh. Holt studied the fletching style and the identification marks painted at the nook end of the arrow. Archers usually identify their own shafts in such ways. Can you tell who did this? Horace asked quietly, and Hope looked up to meet his gaze. There was an expression of deep concern in the Major's eyes. Horace noted that fact alone, more than the carnage around them, sent a wave of uneasiness through him. He knew it took a lot to worry Holt. I think so, said the ranger, and I don't like it. It looks like the Tumanji are on the move again. Yep. No, Tumanjai. Timujai. Timajai? We're going to say Timoji. No, Timujai. Temujai. We're going to say it's the Temujai, okay? Anyway, I'd like to thank you for listening to Read Up to Chapter 6. If you'd like to listen to me read Chapter 7, then please stay posted, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.